that you can support students learning using technology-infused project-based learning approaches. And our goal for this series is to provide educators with tools that you can use right now so that they can support you. We know that teaching never stops. Even if it's summertime, you're still planning for next year. So we're hoping that we can give you the tools you need to start PBL tomorrow if necessary. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and of course, Michelle as well. My name is Robin Nelson. I am currently an educational specialist at UTSA. I taught both public and private school at all levels from pre-K3 all the way to graduate school. I have an MA in education and a PhD in interdisciplinary learning and teaching. And both my MA and my PhD focused heavily on instructional technology, focused specifically on helping pre-service teachers on technology and computer science implementation. I'm joined by Michelle Vega, who is IDRA's Chief Technology Strategist, and she has spent 20 plus years supporting teachers in technology implementation as a technology training and development specialist for Northside, as well as a digital resource specialist for Region 20. She serves as one of the regional leads for the Chief Science Officer program and sits on the steering committee for the Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio. And I am so grateful that she's here to help me. And please, if you have anything you want to add, Michelle, you've got such great experience, please let me know and chime in anytime. So we also want to make you aware of all of the different webinars that are available at IDRA. There's so many great resources. So at the bottom, you'll see that we have the link, and actually this is a static picture, so it's not something that can be clicked on, but I can actually, real quick, I'm going to put this in the chat. If you would like to check out some of our other webinars, you may go to the link that I'm putting in the chat right now and check them out. Those are some great free resources that you can access, and we hope that you will. All right. So before we begin, we've introduced ourselves. We also want to meet you. So in the chat box, if you will tell us your name, where you're from, if you're a teacher, or in a family, what are the age of your learners, or what is the subject that you teach? And if you are a stakeholder, how do you support students in your role, and what institution are you from? So I'm going to give you some time to share with us in the chat. Hi, Rosa. It's nice to meet you. If you'd like to unmute, you are more than welcome to do that as well. Aurelio Montemayor, it's nice to meet you. Ross Alonso. Oh, Rosa works at the teacher preparation program at Texas A&M. Sylvia Valencia, mother of a 9-year-old and 8-year-old. Keeps you busy, I'm sure. Pilar, a Head Start teacher from Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us.
I think that's Pilar.
Pilar, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I think.
We have Sarah Santiago. We have Wayne Fagan. All right. I love seeing all your different experiences. Tech readiness. Okay. STEM pathway, aeronautical. Wow. Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for sharing. For those of you who felt comfortable, I hope that you will. Since right now we only have 13 participants, I would love for you, when we have time to reflect, when we have our breakout sessions, that you would unmute and share with us. It will help us have such a more rich webinar and conversation. So thank you in advance for doing that. All right. So as we move into the next slide, I really want to focus on our objectives. So after completing this webinar, you should be able to, first of all, define what project learning is. There have been so many definitions that have been thrown out there. I really think it's important for us to come to a common understanding of what PBL is and what it's going to look like in your classroom or in your home or in your program, depending on what your role is. We want to identify why project-based learning is great for students, because if we can understand why it's so great, hopefully we will persevere and work towards implementing PBL in our role. We want to also, and this is going to be the major focus of the webinar, how to implement project-based learning. We're really going to break it down into 7 design element components to help you walk through the process of designing your own project-based learning unit to start you off. And that is based on the PBL gold standard from PBL Works. So by the end of this webinar, you should be able to apply the PBL gold standard to your first steps in implementing a project-based learning unit, or if you have already done it before, improve your previous units with this new information. So with that said, our first question is what? So what is project-based learning? And as I mentioned, there's lots of different definitions. So I really want to hear from you. So either in your chat or unmute yourself if you feel more comfortable doing it that way. What do you think PBL is? I really want to understand kind of where you're coming from before we get started. There are no wrong answers here. We just want to get an idea of where we're going. Hands-on learning, great. Interdisciplinary, awesome. I see that we also put student-led and centered. Any other thoughts about PBL that you want to include? All of those are fabulous. Okay. So collaborative learning with guidance, engaging, real-world problems. All right. So according to Boss and Krause, who wrote Reinventing Project-Based Learning, project-based learning is about students investigating open-ended questions and applying their knowledge to produce authentic projects or original solutions. Hi, Teresa, it's nice to meet you. And so very specific definition, but I also want to give you another definition, kind of look at both of them. PBL Works defines project-based learning as a teaching method which students learn by activity, so bringing in some of that hands-on that we talked about, that someone mentioned earlier, that are engaging students in real-world and personally meaningful projects. So here we brought in the real-world or authentic projects. So I think that PBL is such a rich and complex methodology that it is very difficult to capture what it is in one single definition, because both of these definitions are correct. And I think they are both talking about the same thing, but it is difficult to capture all of it in one sentence. So it is a student-centered teaching method. And it's where I like to say students do the heavy lifting. And that is true and it's not true, because the teachers do the heavy lifting up front, but they're supporting students to do the heavy lifting through the learning process. And instead of the teachers standing and talking the whole time, the students really get the chance to get their hands dirty and to not only learn the content, but skills that they will use forever. So it's definitely a great pedagogy that we are excited to share with you today. Wayne says the definition you just put up is what I have in mind. Great example, rocket program at Alamo Heights High School. Awesome. Okay, the next question is why? Why project-based learning? That's a valid question. I think all teachers should ask, why are we using this? Just like our students should ask, why are we doing this? I think sometimes we get a little overwhelmed by that question because sometimes it's hard to answer, but it's a really important question. So I'm going to ask you that question, why? Why would you change how you teach? Or why would you select project-based learning as your methodology? So you can, again, share in the chat your why, or you can unmute if you would like and share your why that way. Aurelio says, connect classroom concepts to the real world. I think that's a great reason. If we connect it to the real world, I think it's a lot more applicable.
Can I, let me see.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's excellent. I do some projects, like a project approach with my little kids, and they decide how they want to study for. And so I can see more collaboration with each other. It's like a training for a future when they go to work. And so they learn to work in collaboration. I guide them. Sometimes they fight and they are trying to solve the problems together, because I don't know why. So we go to do that, you do that, what you want to do. And so they decide. I do like a houses. They want to do chickens. And so I went almost, I think that I want to be fired. I have my thing, but it's different. But this one was very interesting for me. And soon I will be in San Antonio. I will move next year. Well, I'm so excited because exciting. I'm the minority here in my class. I want to be the minority. I want to teach in Texas. So I'm very excited, but I let you talk, and it's excellent class, and I'm very happy.
Well, I'm glad that I'm so glad that you're happy. That's awesome. And everything that you mentioned about project-based learning is wonderful. And I see that some other people put similar things in there as well, to engage learners, to prepare them for the real world. And that's kind of what you mentioned as well, learning how to solve conflicts, whether it's with each other or with their knowledge. And it engages students in teams and with collaboration. So Wayne says another example we implemented is an aircraft build program at Southwest High School that has two components, lab and curriculum. And then Aurelio talks about we weren't born in Texas, but we got here as soon as possible. Well, we're excited that you're here, or excited that you're coming. So that's great. So it sounds like y'all have a really good idea why you are either using PBL already, or why you think it's a great method for you to use in the future. Project-based learning is often selected because it is one of those methods that transforms thinking about learning. It transforms how you work with others. And it also ultimately transforms your abilities, because it doesn't just focus on content, but it focuses on skills, on learning dispositions, and things that you're going to use in your future. It also prepares you for success in and out of the classroom, which a lot of people have touched on, and I think that is crucial. It also builds 21st century skills such as critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication. It provides educational opportunities for all students, and that is something that is really important. It provides equitable opportunities when done properly. It also offers the opportunity to create relationships in a different way between teachers and students, and also with experts or others outside of the classroom, which maybe we don't typically think of or do. It also has been found to increase academic achievement. In one study by Halverson, Duke, and Strachan, it was referenced in Edutopia, and you can see it at the bottom of the screen. They found that students who were in a PBL group showed an increase in those in the testing, the academic achievement testing of those subjects. So I think it was on social studies and reading. So they improved both in social studies and reading, but there was also a reduction in the academic gap between low socioeconomic PBL students and high socioeconomic non-PBL students. So it really did help reduce the achievement gap. So those are some great reasons, in addition to what you have already shared, why PBL might be a great method for you to choose. And I am, for some reason, on a blank screen. Okay, sorry about that. So you have already kind of shared some of the reasons why you either chose to use PBL or interested in learning more about PBL. And we've talked about some of those. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next question, the how. This is going to be the big bulk of the presentation, and it focuses on how to implement project-based learning. And there is one, I wouldn't say type, but a gold standard PBL that really helps identify all the elements you need to effectively implement PBL. And that is from PBL Works. And as you can see, this wheel here is the gold standard PBL from PBL Works. You have criteria that are on the outside, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what I want to talk about right now is the center. The center of PBL are the learning goals, the knowledge, and the skills that you would like students to walk away with after the unit. And so that is still our central focus in PBL. It is not just a project for fun. It is learning, it is intensive, and it is standards based. So that's really crucial. And I wanted to make sure that we start off with that foundation. The criteria help fill in all of the different things that make those learning goals possible. So we start with a challenging problem, sustained inquiry, authenticity, voice and choice, reflection, critique and revision, and public product. Wayne, you can get copies of the slides of this webinar at the end, I believe. If not, you'll at least be able to get a recording of this on the IDRA website. And I think Michelle will be able to give you more information on that. But after introducing the teacher design criteria, the gold standard PBL for PBL Works, we're going to move on to the first criteria, which is the challenging problem. I think most people understand that PBL focuses on a problem. Some people call it a challenge. Some people say it's they use a driving question instead. But regardless, it frames student learning and it helps focus their attention on how to solve the problem or answer the question. And so it goes about instruction a little bit differently. One of the things I would like to encourage you to do when you're starting off on your PBL or using your PBL is to have an entry event. An entry event ignites student curiosity, it builds interest, and it gauges students in questioning. It also frames the question in a real world context. So when we are doing an entry event, we want to introduce students to the topic. We want it to be exciting. It doesn't have to be big and flashy. It can be, but it doesn't need to be. But we want it to immerse them in the topic and help them understand the why this is important. And some of the ways that you can do this, some of the entry events I have seen are, if you're working with younger ones, picture books. They love a picture book. And if it helps make the connection, that's great. You can start with a picture book. You can use art or historical artifacts and examine them very closely and ask probing questions and help them understand the topic and introduce it that way. You can have people come in, subject matter experts come in and talk about the topic or introduce the topic. You can take a field trip. which has been a little bit touch and go with COVID, but there's still lots of virtual field trips you could even take. You can do hands-on projects, which I've seen several people mention that that was something they really enjoyed about PBL. You can do demonstrations. You can have personal experiences, and I'll talk about that in just a second, because to me that sounds a little bit odd. But Earth Day was last week, and many science standards, be it water or material or energy focus on energy conservation. So I'm going to give you a driving question here. How can conserving energy impact our schools? So that's just an example. Let's talk about, if this was our driving question for our class, what might an entry event look like for this driving question? What are some ways? And we have people who are working in institutions like universities. We have some people who are mothers. We have some people who are teachers. We have some stakeholders. So we've got a diverse group of people here. What might an entry event look like for you if maybe we would have to change school to something different? But what would it look like for you? Again, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat. But I just want you to reflect on what an entry event might look like. Okay, have students look at where energy is utilized or wasted. Great, they could chart it. They could create a graph. That's an excellent starting point. I'm going to give a couple of suggestions, and maybe you can add on to that a critical conversation about what they think energy consumption is. Do they have any questions about it? Does anyone know about carbon? Okay, great. So we're having a very a conversation that is filled with questioning and just really sitting down and examining energy. Great. We might be able to contact someone at City Public Service. They might have a demonstration, or they might be able to visit and share their knowledge to interest students. I always love to bring in experts, and that could be on Zoom. It doesn't have to be in person. We know that that's sometimes not possible, COVID or not. Any other ideas? While you're typing or thinking about that, go ahead. Okay, someone muted and then unmuted. That's okay. This was one that I really liked. Somehow in your school, go an hour without using electricity in your classroom. What changes did you have to make? It would definitely give students a different perspective about the importance of energy. And that could be paired with lots of other things. The critical conversation at the end of it, you could have a picture book, you could then have them chart. There's lots of different ways you could do that, but I just wanted to think about some entry events. We have another one. They can find out how much the light bill is for the school. Love that. That definitely makes it very specific. You could also change the community. Maybe it's their family. And maybe they obviously wouldn't necessarily share that, but having that knowledge is definitely helpful. So those are some examples of entry events for this driving question. But I want to look at the next criteria. The next criteria is sustained inquiry. And sustained inquiry is a cyclical process where you pose questions, you find resources, or you ask experts to answer the question. And once you've done that, that's going to lead you to more questions. So it is not a straightforward linear process, which we make education to be so much of the time. It really is going to be a constant circular process of questioning, starting with the entry event and continuing all the way through to the public product at the end. There are 4 types of inquiry that I want to share with you. Starting with the most structured is structured inquiry. And this is where the teacher leads the questioning and helps everyone find the answer together. So this is whole class learning is kind of what I would think of it as. You have controlled inquiry where the teacher poses the question and the teacher also finds the resources for the students and shares those resources with the students. The students then find the answer and present their product. This might be good for younger students just beginning PBL or as a way to scaffold the PBL process as you're training and supporting students in understanding the knowledge and skills they need to be successful in project-based learning. You then have guided inquiry where the teacher asks the questions, but the student selects the resources and the product. So again, you're giving a little bit more responsibility to the students the further you go into these different inquiry options. And the final is open or free inquiry. And the student here creates the question. Ultimately in PBL, I think that this is our goal. We want the student to be able to identify a question, select resources, and the product. Of course, the teacher is going to be hands-on. They're going to guide the student through conferences and formative assessments and help along the way. But ultimately, we want our students to be able to think critically, and this would definitely give that. I will say that it's really important that your inquiry be structured and that you provide scaffolding. You can't immediately start a PBL and have an open inquiry if they do not know how to go through the process. So here, these 4 different types of inquiry might help you structure your PBL if you haven't done it before. And then that brings us to our reflection about sustained inquiry. Having talked a little bit about the scaffolding of inquiry, what are some ways that you can or already have scaffolded your students in the inquiry process? How do you help them come up with questions, or how do you help them find resources? How do you help them choose products? What are some ways that you can help them be successful in these types of processes? Okay, so Aurelio is focusing on middle and high school students, and he likes to guide and facilitate the student learning, which really is the focus of PBL. We're no longer direct teaching, but we're facilitating the learning. Excellent. Trying to bring every student in so that everyone's engaged, and by giving them that responsibility, hopefully that will encourage that as well. Yes, we want them all to be academically challenged. Yes, awesome. Any other specific ways that you can scaffold, whether it's for a kindergartner or someone who is in high school? I would say, while I'm waiting for some people to share, that checklists are really helpful, not only for myself as a teacher, but also for my students. If we have built-in routines and they know the process, those checklists help them keep on track, because knowing that process can be daunting at first. Since this is PBL, finding ways for them to manage their time and their tasks, so calendars. And Michelle, can I ask you, and this is putting you on the spot and I apologize, do you know of any project management tools like calendars or reminders, reminder programs that you have experience with that are helpful in project management?
Yeah, we're actually using one in the office right now, and it's called Microsoft To Do. And Microsoft To Do is free. It's part of the Microsoft suite. And so you can not only create to-do items in a list, but you can also create lists of associated tasks, right? So you can create the task, put it in an associated list if it's part of a particular project, You can set due dates. You can add steps to it. So it's a really nice, helpful tool that's free. I think another way, as you mentioned, is utilizing calendars. So a lot of schools are Google, right? They use Google, the Google suite of applications. And so you can set up appointment times with your students to talk about their projects. You can set calendar reminders of when work needs to be done. So that's another really great way of managing time. But yeah, I mean, as you're talking about scaffolding, you know, you're really leading students, right, through the inquiry process. So, you know, there's the guided conversations, you know, when, like your first example of the energy, it's like, why not actually have a guided discussion about what is energy and how many sources of energy are found on campus, right? Because it's not just the lights, right? So there's human energy, there's the computers, there's so many different, there's battery powered, you know, so as you think about the different forms of energy, then you can start refining, okay, well, which form of energy are we going to focus on? And, you know, and these are things that, you know, when you start looking at the world around you, again, you're bringing in that real world experience and getting the kids to think critically about their environment.
I love that. Yes.
Michelle I just want to mention that in these processes, students are probably much better than the adults at knowing how to use different tools. But when you have these conversations, you want to make sure the students are recording and documenting what's coming out and organize it on a whiteboard or something like that, because they have to come back to it and eventually a project will emerge. In other words, that will get them to some kind of a strategic plan that is time-based, that has objectives and the outcomes they seek in that project. And so all the online tools that I know, for example, Michelle has been teaching us, and I know other of our colleagues use a lot, like Stephanie, and the students are probably better than the teacher at it if you just give them the tool. So let's say they're having this energy conversation and exploring. As they get answers or even as they start brainstorming initially, all that information then can appear. So everybody's thought is honored and placed there, but then they get into a critical dialogue about what it means and where they're going into. So I think the scaffolding is very important. I think that's where you as a teacher, as a facilitator, you can see whether they get stuck or they're not going deep enough or something that helps them get to the next step. And then you suggest that level, that plane to get them to, so that they can move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
No.
it sounds a lot like mind mapping, right? And it sounds like that's something that the teacher can guide through, whether it's done on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper. But go ahead, Dr. Nelson.
No, I'm sorry. Yes, I agree.
Because, you know,
and Stephanie does use mind mapping a lot.
Yeah, you know, the tools, like, for example, where you click on and you have a little post-it and you write on the post-it and you put it on the screen and then you organize all the post-its on there.
On
that
Padlet?
Kind of stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different versions of it. I think there's a lot of different stuff that's out there that's useful for this. And as I said, the kids are quite adept at using that stuff. Usually I'm really challenged with a lot of that stuff because I clicked the wrong way. But once you introduce it, and you just make sure that they notice what everybody's saying, they're listening to each other, they're working as a team, and they're arriving at some point at a project, something they're going to do coming out of these conversations, however they started. It's very important that they keep and then you walk them through the transformation of the conversation, how it started, and you go back to the original brainstorm, and then I said, now we have to get over here, stuff like that, so that the scaffolding is very important. And I think even though I like to have the students become the questioners, the critical dialogue start with them, and that eventually the project come out of those conversations, rather than me think it up front and then just try to get them interested in what I thought of. My role is still very critical in terms of helping them notice things that maybe they're not noticing, how to get them to a deeper conversation, and ultimately to a project that is going to be observable and measurable at the end, whatever they do.
And impactful.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you so much for sharing. Love that. So sustained inquiry and the scaffolding that goes along with it, as Aurelio said, is crucial to the success of PBL. One of the things that I think helps students have buy-in into the PBL unit is authenticity. So if you introduce a problem, or if they introduce a problem that is makes an impact in their school, in their community, or something that they're connected to, if it's important to students, or if it connects with them in some way, whether it's their interest or their family or their community, finding some connection with them and them understanding how, oh, this happens in real life, really helps them engage and be excited about the project, which is kind of what we had talked about before. I want to watch a quick clip of this video. And this shows, now this is at the kindergarten level, but it's a very basic example of what an authentic PBL unit might look like. And it's obviously authentic for this course that we're looking at. Let me pull this up real quick. And I want you to think while you're watching about it, how can you apply it to you and your teaching?
Do you remember?
Dr. Nelson, the sound isn't on. You might need to reshare it and share it with the sound.
Okay, thank
where
you.
you live. Those are all
I'm going to
things
stop
for
share.
environment. So the project is teaching children how to take care of their environment.
Okay, I can hear it now, just don't mute.
Take care of the environment.
Okay.
And teaching them different skills
Well, that's
along
not the
the
right
way.
one, sorry.
We're gonna go outside. I want you guys to look for three things.
And I'm looking for the right.
Is a problem in
There it is.
our environment.
Okay.
Then when you
Dr. Nelson?
She froze.
No, she's there.
Oh. But her mic is off.
Yes.
Play by play, sorry, of my issue there. So you could hear it, but you couldn't see it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, do the screen share again, and then don't mute your computer, because when you mute your computer, it mutes the video also.
Yes. Okay. So I just need to do the desktop.
There we go.
Yep. I apologize.
That's okay. That's the nature of technology.
Okay. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit.
and have the students, the environment was an entry event. The driving question was, how can we take care of the environment and inspire others to help us? Just look around. The entry event of the project was, we had built a playhouse for our previous project, and the kids had designed it, and they were noticing some problems. Trash was being left out, and the environment wasn't being cared for. And so we actually went on a walk to look around the environment and have the students discover what the problems were. I'm just wondering how many people found problems in our environment.
Okay.
The water bottle was on the floor. So you found a water bottle on the ground.
All right. So this was an authentic experience. It was an authentic entry event for the kindergarten students. Obviously, if you're not working with kindergartners, you might do something very different from this, but it does give you a sense of, was it important to them? Was it impactful to them? And it definitely was. So again, coming back to you, what ideas do you have for making your project, because your project is probably going to be very different than that one, authentic? How can you bring authenticity to your PBL unit?
I think that is really identifying what's passionate to the students, right? So that they can start doing the ideating, right? And start coming up with what they want to do. And then at that point, you really have an authentic project because the students came up with it and they're excited about it and they have their passion. And that's just one approach.
Yeah, one aspect of authenticity is the authentic communication and interest of the students. In other words, when the teacher is too dominant in wanting to teach a lesson or push them into something, I know as an English teacher, you want them to write an essay or whatever. They'll eventually write a lot, but where it starts has to be that it's authentically of interest to them, and that shows up what they say, what they think, how they engage. That doesn't mean you can't interest them in things that they're not thinking about, but it has to say, oh yeah, I want that, I like that. By the way, found objects walks are very useful in many reasons. I mean, I think they're great. Anything to get you out of the classroom into the real world, even if you go back in, because found objects are good to then get them to write descriptions in the English class. Obviously there's the recycling issues and stuff like that, but those work for teenagers as well as for children, young children.
I agree. I do. I agree with that. And I'm going to reshare this just as Chrome. That'll help me. Anyone else would like to share? Thank you so much. As I taught English for 7 years, high school English. So, good days, good days. All right.
Why? Oh,
Go for it.
Yeah, it looks like Claude wants to share.
Okay.
Oh, with my experience, like when I do it, that I choose whatever. I see that the authenticity is that they create their own things. They use creativity, and when the kids use this creativity, I think every kid, like a pre-K, 4K, every kid, when you use creativity, you want to be a mastering motivation. That is when they go to helping to the cognition, because they are cooperating, they are creative, they are curiosity, they help to reason it, and also help to social and emotional. It's like I see when I do the projects, my kids, they are very for that. I think it's excellent and it's beautiful because it's how you learn by collaboration and creativity. It's awesome. Anyway, I let you. Thank you, doctor, and thank you, everybody, for listening to me. It's very nice.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I agree. Creativity is a great way to make it authentic, because if they bring their creativity and they bring their thoughts and their way of viewing the world to the project, it's going to make it authentic for them. So I agree 100%.
Pilar, ¿dónde está usted ahorita?
I'm sorry?
Pilar, where are you right now?
I'm in my house.
Yeah, what city? Where?
In middle of nowhere, in Rice Lake, Wisconsin.
Oh, in Wisconsin. Okay.
In Rice Lake, close to Canada.
Okay.
But I will be soon. I hope so.
Qué lejos estoy del suelo donde he nacido.
Ay, sí. Pero.
Okay. For the next criteria, we have voice and choice, which is another important aspect of project-based learning, giving students the chance to choose not only their questions or what they produce, but how they work, improves engagement. And voice and choice is something that people are typically familiar with already. And so I would like to kind of ask what you use for voice and choice. How do you give your students that responsibility and that freedom to make choices? And I'm doing this one backwards this time. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next slide, because this slide, Andrew Miller, who wrote an article for Edutopia, talked about why how voice and choice can be used to investigate why the standard or the topic that they're learning is important. So instead of putting that responsibility on the teacher, ask the students to figure that out. That's could be an entry event, honestly, to ask, who can we help? So really giving students the responsibility to find a way to impact their community, their school, helping their peers. Who can they help with what they're with the knowledge that they've gained? And also voice and choice, we can give them the option of where do you learn. In a lot of classrooms, you've got different areas. You have maybe a reading area, you have a group work area, you have an independent work area, but do you allow them to choose whichever area is most appropriate for them at the time, or do you mandate where they have to be? So that might be another option for giving voice and choice for students. And then when do you want to learn? Do we give students the freedom to choose when they want to learn? And I don't mean a free-for-all, but by choosing timelines, by mapping out what the project will look like and how long it will take. It might take one group a little bit longer than another group, but helping them with the tools necessary to be able to make those critical decisions, but in a responsible manner. Does anyone want to share some ways that they give students voice and choice?
I think sometimes it can feel a little scary to give students, right, their voice and choice, but as long as it's guided by the teacher, then at that point, it becomes quite easy, right? So if for anyone that is kind of reluctant to let the students choose their direction, I think, using a choice board or a guided conversation is a great way to bring their voice and their choice into the conversation.
I agree. And I think there's just the nice thing about this article was that it was trying to offer other ways of giving voice and choice besides just choosing the product or choosing the resources, but helping you think outside of the box about how else can you offer voice and choice within your classroom as well. And the next one is how to implement quality project-based learning through reflection. Reflection is so important throughout a PBL unit to assess student learning and to help them solidify their understanding, as well as to ensure that they have time to think critically about their learning and the production process. So not just how did I do, but did I learn what I wanted to learn? Did I learn what I needed to learn? Were there any obstacles that were difficult for me to overcome? And to really take stock of the entire experience. But it's really, really important that that reflection happen throughout the process. One way we can do this is through formative assessments, using frequent check-ins. And I think Aurelio kind of mentioned that earlier. And then exit tickets, using reflective questions in those exit tickets to make, to encourage these students to think about, did I get what I was supposed to get out of today? What do I understand? What do I not understand? How can I improve? Maybe something for the teacher. How can the teacher help me improve? Evaluations are also super important, and these can happen throughout the process. It doesn't have to be a pre-evaluation and post-evaluation. It could be throughout the process. Rubrics are a great way to help students reflect because it helps them check off boxes. Did I include all of these things? No, I didn't. How can I include those things? Those are reflective questions that they will start to ask themselves, guiding themselves through the process, as well as checklists. We also have, of course, with PBL, we have, the summative assessment is the final product, the public product. but you also have to assess the learning experience, the obstacles they faced, the quality of the product. So it shouldn't just be, okay, we've done the product, moving on. We need to reflect on the entire process, what we've learned from it. So as we move into the next project, we're prepared and can make adjustments. That's something that I think is crucial for reflection. For the next reflection, I really want to give us a chance to talk about these 3 questions from Boss and Krause. They asked these great reflective questions in one of their chapters, and I really wanted to share them with you. Do you consistently use reflection in your classroom or in your program, depending on what you teach and how you teach? In the chat, if you consistently use reflection, if you can put a 1 in the chat right now. If you don't use reflection as consistently as you'd like, put 2, no. And if you're not sure, maybe you do, but maybe you could use more, or maybe you don't want to share. If you would put 3 in the chat. I'm curious about reflection. I know when I was teaching at first, that was not something that I knew to do. I had to learn how important reflection was. And while you're thinking on that, if hopefully someone will enter that into the chat, how can you ensure students reflect productively? And the final question, what are some technology tools that might help your students reflect? We don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. But I hope that you will consider each of these questions, because I think they will help you in implementing reflection within your classroom. Critique and revision. Thank you, Rosa. For critique and revision, this is, to me, one of the most important parts of PBL, and it's something that I think as teachers, we often do not do enough, but it gives the students a chance to engage in this repetitive cycle of giving feedback, receiving feedback, applying what they've been critiqued on, and fixing and improving. It's much like the engineering design process. So you ask, you research, you imagine, you plan, you create, you test, you improve. And in order to improve, you then go through the process again. So it definitely is a cyclical process. I do have a video, but I'm not going to play the video. I'm going to skip to the next section, and I'm going to explain what the video, because I was just going to watch a little bit of it. There was a first grader named Austin. And as you can see here, Austin drew 6 butterfly pictures, but he started off with the one on the very top left. And he was trying to draw a model of a tiger yellowtail swallow butterfly. And for a first grader, the first picture is okay. And he showed it to his peers and to his teacher, and they said, well, they're kind of round. The swallowtail really has pointy wings. So you can see in 2 that the wings got much, much more pointy. But then he went back, and the peer gave them more feedback. And they said, the wings are so much better, and it looks much more like a real swallowtail butterfly, but the tails are pointing in. So maybe the body's just still not quite right. So 3, he tried to get the body right, and the tails are a little bit straighter. Again, went back, and again, they consistently gave very specific feedback. It's not mean, it is pointed to help improve the quality of the product and the learning. So Austin got to 4, and that is a fabulous outline of a butterfly. So the next step was to add the stripes, and the next step was to color it in. So I really encourage you to go back and watch that video. The link is at the bottom of that page. It's a fabulous introduction into how to take students through that critique process and help them understand the purpose of it, and help them learn how to do it appropriately and kindly, and really focus on improving, helping their friends improve, which I think is sometimes difficult. The last one is the public product. The one thing I want to say about public product, yes, they're going to present something or perform something or explain something or display something, but the most important thing for me is that that project, one, have the potential to impact others, but it would be communicated with someone outside of that classroom. Give the students an authentic audience. If they're working on electricity for the school, can they present that plan to the principal? Can they present that plan to the school board as ways that they can conserve energy and honestly help the school board and the district save money? Have an authentic audience to present that public product to. If it can make a real impact, it will impact the students and their learning as well. Michelle put the link to that video in the chat. Thank you, Michelle. I really love that video and it just does a great job. We're gonna skip this video for time. This is our last reflection. And I would love for you to chime in. If you wanna unmute, you can unmute. If you wanna chat, do it in the chat box. But how do you imagine students presenting their public product? What are some ways you've done it in the past, or how would you do it in the future after this webinar? Public presentations are great. I think that nervousness, that fear also kind of brings a little bit of extra effort that you wouldn't see for just a classroom presentation. All right, in the interest of time, the last one is where, and the where is simply create a video. Love creating videos. You get the creativity, you have a skill, you can share it and have a public campaign that you could even share on social media. So many options when you create a video as a public product. But resources, we've provided several resources for you, an essential project design elements checklist that you can use to create project-based learning units. Again, it scaffolds your learning as you develop a project-based unit. This is a project-based design rubric that is a little bit more specific and gives you more details about the project-based learning unit that might be more helpful. Again, there's links at the bottom as well. And Pilar says, I believe that the students with the projects have the opportunity to use a variety of resources to find their answers and questions. And that is an excellent skill for learning. I agree that it is an excellent skill for learning. Student criteria from high quality PBL is also something that overlaps with the PBL works. Challenge, authenticity, public product, and reflection are all also in the essential design elements from PBL works. So that shows how important and critical they are for project-based learning. And then you have the 7 project-based teaching practices. These are teaching practices that hopefully we will have a chance to talk about in another webinar, but I wanted to introduce these to you as well. They are from PBL Works, and they are a great supplement to helping you manage and support students in the PBL process. So, Michelle, I'm not sure if we have time for the final breakout session. I'm going to leave this up to your discretion. If not, I'm going to let you close us out.
Okay, yeah, it's we want to be respectful of time, and it's 2:59, so I think we'll go ahead and just close out. And then we'll do a little Q&A. But I did want to talk to you guys, and I'm putting the links in the chat box now, that IDRA is committed to supporting you, and so we want to hear from you. If you're interested in a topic for a webinar, or if you're seeking technical assistance training, please let us know, and use the first link that I just put in the chat box to fill out the form and let us know what you think. Additionally, the next 2 links, you have the link to our YouTube page where you'll find all the webinars, as well as any conference keynotes that we've had from our different events, as well as our legislative updates. So we really hope that you go to our YouTube page and subscribe so that you get notices every time we post a new webinar. And then finally, the last link that you'll find there is for our Learning Goes On. So during this pandemic, we've been committed to offer webinars and materials that are pertinent to what's going on in education. So the page houses all of our resources that we've created during the pandemic, and we hope that you'll find that it'll assist with your online learning. We know that next year, or we hope that next year things will be more normal and we'll be back in the classroom. But we also know that there's going to be a lot of hybrid situations. So if you're looking for tips and tricks for online education, please visit that site. The next slide actually just kind of gives you a snippet, a look at what the Learning Goes On page looks like. And then on the next slide, you'll find our YouTube page. So if you want to go ahead and progress to the next slide, Dr. Nelson, that would be great. And so this is where all of the recorded webinars are, but as you can see, we also post any of our student content as well as our event content. So please subscribe. The page offers a lot of really helpful information. And so just to kind of close out, we'll stick around if anybody has questions. But here is the IDRA contact information. So if you want to reach our offices, feel free to do so. As Dr. Nelson mentioned, IDRA does house one of the longest serving equity assistance centers. And so if there's something going on your campus, a Title IX violation or anything like that, let us know. We want to be able to support you. You're in our region. And so we want to be there to assist you and assist your school with all compliance on our 4 equity issues. So that's it. So like I said, we'll stick around. It's 3:02. We'll stick around for a few more minutes in case anybody wants to add anything or give us some comments or ask some questions. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you found this information helpful. Thank you to Dr. Nelson for sharing this wonderful information with us. And I'll stop talking.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for all of your help. And thank you all so much for coming out. We'd love, if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them, but thank you so much for coming.
Such a quiet group today.
Yes, it was. It was.
I actually did have a question.
Yes.
So for next school year, we are looking into implementing PBLs during the school year. What would be your recommendation as far as how many per year, or even for a teacher, because they are teaching all different subject areas? What would you recommend to start off with?
I would say that districts that we work with typically, well, a lot of times they work up to at least 4, so 1 per 9 week. But I think that that is an admirable goal, especially if you're looking at it now and you have the time to plan. These units don't have to last the entire 9 weeks. They can just be, they could be 1 week, they could be a few days, they could be, 6 weeks. But setting that goal of every 9 weeks, we're going to have one, and it could even bridge all subjects or multiple subjects. I think is a good goal to have.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
I would suggest also is that you use aspects of the project-based learning early on. Like if you can, if it's a middle school or high school class, start getting the students in the habit of having critical conversations, listening to each other, being able to summarize what people said in reports from small groups, so that they start learning how you listen to others, work in a group, give reports, and so that they get used to that process, that their conversation is important and their peers' conversation is important, and you as a teacher help through the reports point that out. Test whether they were really listening to each other, in terms of saying, okay, I want you to report back, but you're going to report back what your partner said, and your partner will report what you said, that kind of stuff. In other words, you build the listening up in such a way that by the time you get to, okay, we're going to work on a project, they already have that process in place. And it's one of many, but I think it's a key one. It's an important one, because all of us need a lot more practice in listening to each other anyway. It's a universal challenge.
It's true.
How many homes do you hear a parent saying, "You don't listen to me," and the child says, "You don't listen to me," or the partner says, "You never listen to me."
I think we're all guilty of that.
Well, yeah, and it's a natural thing. So that as a teacher, I think you have to really listen to the students, but also help them with the tools for listening, and saying, equal airtime, for example. Okay, 3 minutes each way or 1 minute each way. Okay, let's switch, stuff like that.
It's hard to think about all the different things that students need to know how to do to be successful, but that really does prepare them for life, which I think is the main goal of PBL. It really does prepare them for life, because you do have all these skills that you're focusing on.
Yeah, I put a note in the column in terms of dealing with teenagers, especially, to curb the sarcasm and the quick put down, and that culture of putting down in friendly ways, but still it hurts kind of stuff. And so that's part of the underlying process of listening to each other, but with respect, and no matter how outlandish somebody else's opinion is, it's their opinion, and just move through that.
I think it's a great opportunity too for students to see teachers collaborating together on a project-based learning assignment. So, if the teachers are working with each other, maybe in the language arts class, they're reading a particular book, and then you go into science, and then there's experience or experiments or projects that you can do that are based on the book, and then you go into your geography class, and maybe you're talking about. So, I mean, I know that's a little widespread there, but it's great to see your teachers collaborating and the students collaborating on a PBL.
And that's a huge challenge, because you're separated by content at middle school and high school. I mean, the radical change from elementary to middle is that you no longer have one teacher for most of the classes. You're already in. And so for the English teacher to get together with a social studies teacher and the science teacher, yet it's critical. There were some missed opportunities in some projects, the community-based organization in South Texas. The students, they have very active intergenerational projects. And so the students from that unincorporated community, it's a colonia, it doesn't have any city services. There was a open sewer plant, and it smelled very bad for generations. And they went to a presentation on environmental justice. And from that, they actually started looking at, because the ladies thought it was their own plumbing that smelled bad, not that there was a sewage plant. So this group of students, there were about 12 of them. They were high school students. They started doing a study, and they eventually presented to the city council on it. Now, I wanted to connect them to the math and science teachers, because there was so much math, and the classroom teachers never connected to it. In other words, I said, talk to your math teacher about what's the math involved in here, what's the science involved. I could get them to write articles as an English teacher, and I was working with them on that. And I wanted them to write poetry and report it as a journalist. But the challenge for teachers is when the project comes from a student or community initiative, they say, "No, wait, I didn't think of it. How does it fit here?" That's the challenge I was facing.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Dr. Nelson and Michelle and everybody, I think with this project, not only go to help all the teachers learn about the projects too, and we learn with these students, but also they help the children to have social and emotional skills that we now need, like a collaboration, accept others, because we got to have the special needs working with us, and so they need to help special need kids, like in my class. Those they got to help and accept children's different. Those we got to have more empathy, and also it's like a social emotional that we need to live in a country like here, more united. It's one of the things that I like. And thus when you are more united, you reason more and you begin to learn more.
Right.
I think-
Respecting diversity, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, definitely. So
And there's also-
we're at 3:10 now. So is there any closing thoughts, Dr. Nelson, that you'd like to add?
I just thank you so much. I think there's going to be lots of resources that are posted on IDRA that are associated with this, or that you'll be able to access through the video or through maybe links below. So I just encourage you to go there, and thank you so much for coming.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Adios.
Adiós. Hasta pronto. Bye.